On April the 16th, 1746, an event occurred that would change Scotland forever and end a way of life that was centuries old overnight. The Battle of Culloden stands as a pivotal moment in Scottish history, a clash that shaped the destiny of a nation and directly affected the country for decades. As we journey back to that windswept moor near Inverness, we are drawn into the heart-wrenching drama of the Jacobite cause's final stand. In this video, I'll delve deep into the events that unfolded on that spring day, exploring the motivations, strategies, and consequences of this decisive confrontation. But what were the underlying factors that led to the Jacobite Rising of 1745? And what drove Bonnie Prince Charlie and his followers to take up arms against the crown? How did the Jacobites achieve early successes, only to face crushing defeat at Culloden? What were the tactical and strategic decisions made by both sides, and how did they shape the outcome of the battle? And perhaps most poignantly, what were the far-reaching consequences of Culloden, both for Scotland and the wider British Isles? Join me as I embark on this fascinating journey seeking to understand the tragedy of Culloden and its enduring significance on Scottish and British history. The Battle of Culloden, fought on a bleak and windswept moor near Inverness in Scotland, took place on April the 16th, 1746, becoming the last battle to occur on British soil. This pivotal clash marked the culminating moment of the Jacobite Rising of 1745, a daring campaign aimed at overthrowing the established Hanoverian dynasty and restoring the exiled Stuart monarchy to the British throne. At its helm stood Charles Edward Stuart, more famously known as Bonnie Prince Charlie, whose ardent belief in the divine right of his family to rule propelled him to lead this audacious rebellion. The Jacobite cause found its roots in the discontent simmering among the Scottish Highlanders, aggrieved by the political and religious changes that had swept across Britain since the Glorious Revolution of 1688. The Stuarts, descendants of James VII of Scotland, who was also James II of England, had been ousted from power and replaced by the Protestant Hanoverians. For many Highland clans, loyal to their traditional way of life and their Catholic faith, the Jacobite cause symbolised a chance to reclaim their ancestral rights and restore their rightful sovereign to the throne. The Jacobite risings of 1689, 1715 and 1719 were earlier attempts to restore the Stuarts to the throne. Each uprising had been driven by the deep-seated loyalty of the Highland clans to the Stuart dynasty, and their resistance to the economic and political marginalisation imposed by the Hanoverians. These earlier rebellions had been characterised by a blend of military engagements and political manoeuvrings, but had ultimately failed due to a combination of poor coordination, inadequate support, and decisive defeats in battles. By 1745, the dissatisfaction among the Highlanders had reached a boiling point. The ongoing imposition of new laws and taxes by the Hanoverian government, along with attempts to disarm the Highland clans and suppress their traditional ways of life, had created a fertile ground for rebellion. The Stuarts, particularly Bonnie Prince Charlie, saw this as an opportunity to capitalise on the growing discontent and rally the clans once more. The Jacobite Rising of 1745 was marked by a series of dramatic events, including the surprising and rapid advances made by the Jacobite forces into England, reaching as far south as Derby. This bold incursion, however, ultimately failed to garner the necessary support from English Jacobites and foreign allies, forcing the Jacobites to retreat back to Scotland. The Rising's initial successes and ultimate failure set the stage for the final, devastating confrontation at Culloden. Opposing the Jacobites stood the forces of the Hanoverian establishment, commanded by the Duke of Cumberland, son of King George II. Trained in the art of warfare and backed by the might of the British Crown, Cumberland's army represented the staunch defence of the established order against the perceived threat of Stuart restoration. After the battle, Cumberland would become known as Butcher Cumberland for his harsh suppression of the Jacobite rebellion. As the two sides converged on the moor at Culloden, the stage was set for a climactic showdown that would decide the fate of the clans. The Battle of Culloden would not only determine the immediate outcome of the Jacobite Rising, but affect the future of Scotland for decades, if not centuries to come. Its aftermath would see the suppression of Highland culture, the dismantling of traditional clan structures, and the onset of a period of profound change that would reshape the fabric of Scottish society and identity for generations. In sealing the fate of the Jacobite cause, Culloden would become a defining moment in Scottish history, forever altering its path and its place within Britain. In August 1745, Bonnie Prince Charlie landed on the western coast of Scotland at Eriskay, having journeyed from France. The young prince quickly set about rallying support from the Scottish Highland clans. Despite scepticism and reluctance from some clan leaders, his charisma and the promise of restoring Stuart rule galvanised a significant following. The initial phase of the Jacobite rising was fraught with challenges. One of the early setbacks was the failed siege of Edinburgh Castle. However, the tide soon turned in favour of the Jacobites. On September the 21st, 1745, the Jacobite forces achieved a stunning victory at the Battle of Prestonpans, near Edinburgh. This battle saw the Jacobite army, led by experienced commanders such as Lord George Murray, employing unconventional Highland charge tactics that overwhelmed the government troops under Sir John Cope. The decisive nature of this victory bolstered Jacobite morale and legitimacy, attracting more recruits and solidifying their control over much of Scotland. Buoyed by these successes, the Jacobite leadership made the audacious decision to invade England. In early November, they crossed the border and advanced through Carlisle, capturing the city with little resistance. Their march continued southward through Lancashire and into Derbyshire, with the ultimate aim of reaching London and toppling the Hanoverian regime. By early December, the Jacobite army had reached Derby, just 125 miles from the capital. The advance into England, however, was not without its challenges and controversies. Despite the rapid progress, the Jacobite forces encountered logistical difficulties and a lack of widespread English support. Moreover, intelligence reports indicated that a large British army, led by the Duke of Cumberland, was mobilising to intercept them. Faced with the daunting prospect of a major confrontation far from their supply lines and uncertain about the promised French support, the Jacobite leadership held a council of war. The decision was made to retreat back to Scotland. The retreat marked a turning point in the campaign. Although it was conducted in good order and without immediate disaster, it signalled a loss of momentum and an erosion of confidence among the Jacobites. The withdrawal also gave the Hanoverian forces time to regroup and mount a decisive counter-offensive, setting the stage for the eventual confrontation at Culloden. By the time the Jacobites reached the Scottish Highlands, their situation had deteriorated significantly. Morale was low, and infighting among the Jacobite leadership further compounded their troubles. Bonnie Prince Charlie, though charismatic and determined, struggled to maintain unity and focus within his ranks. Many of his men were ill-equipped and weakened by hunger, reducing their effectiveness in combat. On April the 16th, 1746, the Jacobite and British armies finally met at Culloden Moor. The choice of battlefield was disastrous for the Jacobites. Culloden Moor was marshy and uneven, ill-suited for the Highland charge, the traditional Jacobite tactic that relied on close combat. The government forces, by contrast, were well rested and disciplined, having received ample supplies and reinforcements, plus the Duke of Cumberland's experience and tactical awareness provided a stark contrast to the beleaguered Jacobite leadership. Despite recognising the disadvantages of their position, the Jacobite leaders were forced to engage. Attempts to find a more favourable location or to delay the battle until reinforcements and supplies could be secured were thwarted by the pressing advance of Cumberland's forces. On the eve of the battle, a desperate night march aimed at launching a surprise attack on the government camp ended in failure. The exhausted Jacobite troops arrived too late and in disarray, compelled to withdraw and face the inevitable confrontation on Culloden Moor. The Battle of Culloden commenced in the early afternoon. British artillery began a relentless bombardment of the Jacobite lines. The thunderous roar of cannon fire and the ensuing explosions marked the beginning of a brutal onslaught. The artillery's devastating accuracy created chaos among the Jacobite ranks, causing significant casualties and disrupting their formations before they could even advance. The battlefield's marshy terrain played a crucial role in the battle, as the ground, sodden from recent rains, severely hindered the Highlanders' mobility. As the Jacobites attempted to advance, their progress was slowed by the quagmire underfoot. Their once fearsome charge was reduced to a laborious trudge. This loss of momentum was critical, as the Highland charge, known for its speed and ferocity, was blunted by the difficult terrain. As the Jacobites struggled through the mire, the Hanoverian forces maintained their discipline and formation. The government troops, well trained and equipped, unleashed disciplined volley after volley of musket fire. These volleys tore through the advancing Highlanders, with each successive onslaught further thinning the Jacobite ranks, their battle cries drowned out by the relentless crack of musket fire. Despite their valour and reputation as fierce fighters in close combat, the Jacobites found themselves at a severe disadvantage. Their traditional combat style, which relied heavily on the shock of the initial charge and hand-to-hand combat, was rendered ineffective against the organised and sustained firepower of the government troops. The Highlanders, many wielding broadswords and shields, called targes, were unable to close the distance quickly enough to engage in the close-quarter fighting where they excelled. The Hanoverian forces, bolstered by superior numbers and better logistical support, continued their methodical advance. The combination of artillery bombardment, effective use of terrain, and disciplined musket volleys proved overwhelming. As the battle wore on, the Jacobite lines began to break under the relentless pressure. Those who managed to reach the government lines found themselves outmatched, their numbers dwindling rapidly. The Duke of Cumberland's strategy of attrition and disciplined warfare ultimately triumphed over the Jacobites' valour and traditional combat methods. The marshy terrain and the government's superior firepower and tactics sealed the fate of the Jacobite army. The battle lasted less than an hour and culminated in a decisive and devastating defeat for Bonnie Prince Charlie and his followers, marking the end of the Jacobite cause. The Battle of Culloden not only marked the end of the Jacobite rising, but also initiated a period of brutal repression and systematic dismantling of Highland society. The Jacobites suffered devastating losses during the battle, with estimates suggesting up to 1,500 killed or wounded, in stark contrast to the relatively minor casualties of less than 300 on the side of the British. This overwhelming defeat set the stage for a grim and punitive aftermath. In the wake of their victory, the Duke of Cumberland's forces launched a ruthless campaign to crush any remaining Jacobite resistance and to ensure that such an uprising could never happen again. Butcher Cumberland directed his troops to scour the Highlands, hunting down and executing any surviving rebels. Even those suspected of Jacobite sympathies faced execution, often without trial. Cumberland's troops burned homes and farms, slaughtered livestock, and destroyed food supplies in an effort to starve the Highland population into submission. Villages were razed, and entire communities were displaced. This scorched earth policy left a trail of devastation, with many families rendered homeless and destitute. The government also enacted a series of laws aimed at eradicating Highland culture and breaking the power of the clans. The Disarming Act of 1746 made it illegal for Highlanders to carry weapons, effectively stripping them of their means of self-defence and their traditional warrior identity. The Act of Prescription in the same year banned the wearing of tartan, a symbol of clan allegiance and Highland pride. This prohibition sought to dismantle the distinctive cultural identity of the Highlanders and to integrate them into the broader British society. Furthermore, the Heritable Jurisdictions Act of 1746 abolished the traditional judicial powers of clan chiefs, who had previously exercised significant autonomy and authority within their territories. This act centralised legal authority under the British government, undermining the traditional clan structure and reducing the chiefs to mere landowners without real political power. In addition to these legal measures, many Highlanders were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands in a process that would later become known as the Highland Clearances. These clearances, which intensified in the decades following Culloden, involved the eviction of tenants to make way for sheep farming, deemed more profitable by landowners. Thousands of Highlanders were displaced, leading to widespread emigration to the lowlands, the Americas, and beyond. The combined impact of military repression, legal restrictions, and economic displacement fundamentally altered the social and cultural landscape of the Highlands. The traditional clan system, which had been the bedrock of Highland society for centuries, was effectively dismantled. The loss of their way of life, coupled with the harsh measures imposed by the government, left a deep and lasting scar on the Highland people. Despite the devastation, the memory of Culloden and the Jacobite cause endured in Scottish cultural consciousness. Songs, poems and stories kept alive the spirit of resistance and the longing for a lost way of life. The battle's legacy continues to resonate, symbolising both the tragedy of a failed rebellion and the resilience of a people determined to preserve their heritage. If you enjoyed this video, then give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be notified of our next video. Join us next time, where we'll be diving into more fascinating events from history.